There's various forms of suicide. The form of suicide we've talked about at the moment in the community, and I'm talking about here, are where you take your own life by an act of commission of suicide, such as driving off Beachy Head, going for a long swim from Lamorna Cove, jumping in front of a train, driving your car at a brick wall or a tree. Those are, or sleeping pills, those are very clear acts of commission, single acts of commission leading to your death by suicide. Those forms are rarer than what I call long-term suicide, a suicide that occurs over a period of months, sometimes over years, where you stop caring about whether you live or die. Thanatos becomes more important than eros in your life. The love of death is more attractive. And you take on the behaviors that will result in your death, but over a longer term. They're still acts of commission, but they're not as dramatic as driving off Beachy Head, driving off a cliff, jumping in front of a train. They take longer, the end result is the same, but you are responsible and you are unconscious for longer before you commit suicide. It's a longer drawn out process. And that's a very painful suicide because it's not quick. It's very long. It might involve people around you caught up in a conspiracy with you to either commit co-suicide or to assist you in your suicide. It depends who you got in your life. A lot of the gay men I've known who've committed suicide, either the quick suicide or the long-term suicide, are without any network, any support system to catch them. No one much knows they're alive, so when they're dead, no one much notices they're dead. And that's dangerous. And I say to gay men, get your support system, your network around you from the beginning. Support each other from the beginning. Because suddenly when you need support and you haven't built up a support network, there's going to be no one there. And so when you hit depression and you think about suicide, either dramatic, quick or long term, there's no one to share this with, there's no one to discuss this with, there's no one to bounce it off with. I have a client at the moment in that position. He's been diagnosed as very seriously clinically depressed and using the clinical HAD self-diagnostic scheme in need of urgent counselling. And they've told him he qualifies, but the waiting list for what he wants with his cognitive behavioural therapy is between 2 and 3 years in London. Meanwhile, he's talking to me. I'm the only person he feels listens, which says he's got no one else in his life. That he's talking of going to the Dignitas clinic in Zurich and committing euthanasia. And under the mental health regime, because he's got this diagnosis, I imagine also having AIDS at the same time as the mental health diagnosis, he might well qualify under Dignitas regulations to be allowed to commit euthanasia at their clinic. So his was a longer suicide, but I know many people in his position who are contemplating long-term suicides because their lives really are not worth living, so they feel. And they're locked in repetitive behavior patterns where they can't look at alternative ways of behaving. They are living groundhog lives. Every day is like the day before and it's going to be like the day to come. So they're living each day over and over and over. And it's fuck it. Both shoes have dropped because they're positive, now everything else drops. either dramatically, instantly, or over a long term. And because the medication is working, so that's not the cause of their distress. Although admittedly some of the drugs in the combination therapy under which they are committed to a lifetime of ingestion have very severe and serious psychological and psychiatric impact. All these drugs have very serious effects on their psychology. So you can't tease out what is depression and what is a side effect of the drug, for instance. It hasn't been properly studied. These young men and older men are in danger, firstly from their drugs, secondly from their isolation, and thirdly from their lack of self-awareness of who they are and what they're doing to themselves, what their lives are like. And then they embark on the plan of having a long-term suicide. Maybe they don't call it that because that's an act of intelligent naming. Maybe they don't do that. Maybe what they do is live the lives. And I don't call these lifestyles, I call them death styles. They have death styles that replace lifestyles that lead eventually to that open grave where they will end up. And I've seen this happen too often to say it doesn't happen. It needs to be properly studied. And if someone presents to the health service as in need of counselling to prevent their further deterioration, mental deterioration, or eventual death or suicidal tendencies, they need to be treated not in 3 years' time, but now. And if they haven't got a network around them, who are they going to talk to about these things? I think people, gay men, are dying needlessly because they haven't either set up systems, and no systems exist out there into which they can slot easily. Just recently in London, we had an Eastern European man, a young man, 23, who jumped off a tower block balcony because he had just been diagnosed HIV positive. And it was claimed he jumped because he'd found out he was HIV positive. I would challenge that. I would say any gay man who found that the way out was suicide as a result of an HIV positive diagnosis maybe was in line to commit suicide for another reason anyway. Or they hadn't done their research. Anyone becoming HIV positive now can expect to live a full and normal life and die of old age if they box clever, if they take precautions that I've already mentioned, such as avoiding recreational drugs, avoiding unsafe sex, you don't want to take a single pathogen into your life. But if suicide is the only way out after your diagnosis, I'll say your life wasn't working anyway. And this was a way out for you. I've known many gay men in the past who've committed suicide, but this was the first wave of AIDS. I'm talking of the late 80s, when there literally was no way out as far as medication was concerned. There were no drugs that worked. And then they thought, well, I'm going to drive off a cliff, I'm going to jump off Beachy Head, or go for a long swim and not come back. The most glamorous suicide was a friend of mine who swam out from Lamorna Cove in Cornwall into the moonlight and never came back. But that was 87. Anyone contemplating suicide today as a result of an HIV diagnosis has not examined all their options. There are many options, many alternatives.